All right, welcome everyone. Looks like we're recording now. I'd like to welcome you to our first Purdue Ohio State collaborative webinars series for this semester. I am one of your instructors. I'm used to teaching credit. I'm one of your lead today. I'm Dina Namath Covert, and I am a professor at Ohio State ATI, where I've taught introductory level courses online using this tool we're going to talk about today. I also, for the other half of my position, I'm currently the online director for academic programs as well as non-credit, so extension as well. So this is a nice tool we're going to talk about today that will go across both audiences. Joining me is Amy. Amy, do you want to say a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Amy Komicher. I'm an instructional designer, and I've worked in academic credit and building with Pressbooks to use for the classroom environment, and we're also experimenting with it in the extension realm where I help facilitate online extension programming as well.
Fantastic. And we would like to hear a little bit about all of you as well. So if you could take a second we'll use the chat box. That way we don't take a lot of time. And if you're not familiar with where to find that in Zoom, if you move your mouse kind of towards the bottom of your screen of Zoom, you should see a little chat option come up and you can click on that and that'll get you into the chat box. So if you can just quickly introduce yourself, tell us a little bit maybe where you are. So you can see Ryan and Aaron have put in something there. And then also if there's something in particular that you're hoping we cover today, if you can put that in as well. That way it'll make sure we focus on that or don't forget to do that. So let me give you a minute or two to do that. So go ahead and everyone go into the chat box and say a little bit of where you're from. And then if there's something in particular you'd like us to cover today. Hi, Annie. Thanks for typing in there. And we think today that most everyone is from Ohio State, except for Ryan, who's from Purdue. Hi, Elliot and Debbie. Okay, we'll do another minute here for anyone else that wants to go ahead and type in the chat box. So again, if you're new to Zoom, just hover your mouse over the bottom and you'll have a chat kind of icon pop up. You can click on that and then you can type in the chat box. And this is also a good way as we're going along, you can type in questions that you have, or feel free to use your microphone too, because we've enabled that today. Hi, Patricia and Danae. How to get connections interacting with the counties. Okay. All right, looks like we've got several 4-H folks. Sweet. Okay, go ahead and keep typing if you are. I'm going to go ahead and open up PowerPoint. These are just some initial talking points. Again, feel free to interrupt us as we go through. What I'm going to do is kind of tell you why I picked the tool, and then we'll share a little bit of, hold on, I'm talking and trying to click at the same time. We'll share a little bit of how we got to picking this one, and then also some of the initial data that we're seeing. All right, now I've got to move some things around here to get to the, oops. Okay. Everyone see that okay now? If your pictures of everybody's video is kind of in the way, you can click on that box and move it around on your screen. So I'll assume we're okay, and Danae and Amy can watch if any questions come in there. Okay, so what we're going to be talking about today is this tool called Pressbooks. rather than kind of focusing on the tool, I want to kind of focus on why we picked it. Rather than having a tool kind of direct what we develop, we always like to think about what's the need or what is it we're trying to accomplish, and then go find the tool that fits that the best. Okay, so you've heard from Amy and I. Let me move forward. There we are. Okay, so I'm going to give you an example. This is a class that I taught at ATI. It's an introductory weed science class. It's for credit. This is for sophomores, so their second year or so of school at ATI. But these students are going to probably, about half of them will go on into Columbus to do a 4-year degree. Half of them will stop with an associate's degree. All of them have ambitions to go back into the ag profession, either as a crop consultant, work for a local co-op, work on their own farm or family businesses. Probably about half of them have plans to go back to their family farms and work in those businesses. So what I try to do, and like 90% of the students or more are from Ohio. So I try to tie them into our extension resources, right? Because after they're done with me in class and they go back out to the real world, they don't realize it yet, they're going to continue to have some questions. So I try to tie them back to our local land grant experts so they can go to them whenever they have other questions 5 years down the road, that kind of thing. So one of the tools I provide for them is the weed control guide. And some of you may be familiar with this. This is a joint project with Purdue and Ohio State and Illinois. So the weed scientists have gotten together to develop this. It is, let me see if I've got it up handy here. Yeah, here we go. So I went ahead and pulled it up. So it's very much a great resource, you know, like a fact sheet kind of thing that we would normally think about through our extension kind of venues. Okay, so it kind of goes through different herbicides, it gives you the details of them, what are the rates you want to use. There's also, I don't have a chart handy, but there's also some charts in the book that will tell you what weeds work good based on research that's been done at our 3 universities. So trying to help the producers pick the best herbicide. Okay, so what this does not do, though, is it's kind of like a textbook, right? So, and a reference guide. So it doesn't ask the reader to really practice with it. Now, a lot of the farmers have used it before, so they know how it works, but my students don't necessarily know how to do that. All right, so let me go back to the PowerPoint here. All right. So that's the weed guide. So this is how I use it in the class. So here I've just got a few screen captures of what the credit side of the class looks like. Okay, so we've got links up here to where they can go to a Zoom room. So we meet remotely for both the lab as well as the class. We use another tool called Top Hat. Some of you may be familiar with that. It's a good way for the students to kind of interact with me live. In there, then we also have a link to the weed guide that I just showed you, as well as this digital book that I'm going to walk you through here in a minute. So what I do for each week is I've got the learning objectives that they need to accomplish, and then also what their to-do list is. So this is something Amy helped me put together. Okay, so with that, there's a homework assignment. And in this homework, there are questions then that they can answer by using the digital book that I'm going to show you in a second. And that digital book uses some of the elements from the weed guide, or it links back out to it. So using both of those kind of resources is how they can answer the questions. So it makes them kind of dive into the content a little bit more. Okay, so this is an example of the weed book, or the digital book. So what happened as well is before I created the digital book, we had where I would do typical lectures, right? The PowerPoint recording kind of thing. This is a flipped classroom, so the students would have to work through that content on their own and then come to class where we would have more activities. Okay, so after about 2 or 3 years, we realized, okay, it was time to go back and redo some of those video recordings. But I had this suspicion that the students weren't actually watching the recordings, as brilliant of a speaker as I am, right? And so we actually did a survey and asked them if they were doing that. We could get some data, but we weren't positive of what it was really showing us. Well, and actually, I don't know that we could get the data if they were actually clicking on the links or not. anyway, long story short, turns out the students were not watching the videos. Maybe 1 out of 40 of them would actually watch the weekly videos. So rather than putting all the time into redoing videos that the kids weren't going to watch, the students, we stumbled across this Pressbooks tool. So there was a group out of Wisconsin, University of Wisconsin, that was using this, and they were showing us some really cool interactivity that was in the book. It wasn't just electronic PDF, they were embedding videos, and so we've done the same thing. The other thing that really caught my eye with it is there's a lot of there's analytics data behind it, so that way we can see what are the students really clicking on and utilizing or not. Okay, and they were, okay, I can't remember if Wisconsin was doing this or not, but there was another group within this Unizen group, which were a member of this big consortium, where their extension folks were kind of looking at this tool as well. If this would be better for just our typical resource guides, because we could put in some interactivity and help the learner kind of dive in a little bit deeper rather than just kind of glancing through it. Okay, and we'll give you a link to that. Amy, actually, I think we'll go ahead. If you want to share your screen, you said you had a nice screen capture of showing some of the interactive elements. And then we'll turn you guys loose. You can click around through the book yourself a little bit as well.
Sure. So I'll share my screen and I'm going to show one of the chapters that features a lot of the different elements that we're able to pull in utilizing Pressbooks, which would include information from resources such as potentially the weed guide. We also utilize some really nice small clips from Dina's old lectures that we found were difficult to replicate in other formats. So we processed those videos and put closed captioning on them, and we were able to embed them in the digital book. And H5P is this other element that we can use to incorporate different interactive question types. This one's just multiple choice, but students can read and check their learning and check the answer. And if they don't get it correct, they can retry, go back and check their work. So we've got a lot of options for how we present content to the students. And this page features another H5P element, which is really helpful in organizing content, collapsible panels, to help minimize the long scrolling situation you sometimes get into with text heavy items. So that's kind of some samples of content that you can pull into this digital book to make for a more interactive experience. Dina, is there anything else you'd like me to touch on?
I don't think now. Let's go ahead and give him the link to this book. You guys can click around through it. And I think what I'll do is give you a few minutes to kind of click and shout out questions that you have. And then what we're going to do is show you what it looks like from an instructor perspective, so you can see what it's like to build this kind of platform. While Amy pulls in the link, I did want to mention too that you don't have to do like, okay, so this book has ended up being 20 chapters, about 200 pages long, but you don't have to do it that extensive. So we also have a small project that we did with a community college where they were doing the same kind of experiment for their students that we were doing at ATI, and we created just a simple e-lesson for the lab instructions, and it's maybe 5 pages. So that would be an example too, where you could do a simple 1 or 2 page fact sheet kind of thing that you might want to use for extension or 4-H or whatever. But it's the interactivity is what really caught our eye in it, as well as some of the analytics that are behind the scenes. So in the chat box, Amy put the link for this weed book as an example. So if you can see that, it's at ohiostate.pressbooks.pub and then /CRPSOIL 2422T. So let me give you a few minutes to go ahead and click through there and just see what it looks like from like a student perspective. And I'll kind of pause so you can shout out some questions you have, type them in the chat box, give you a chance to interact here. One thing that we do like about this tool, and we can show you this from the instructor perspective, is okay, not only can you interact with it like you're going to do right now from the link, but it can also be saved as a PDF. So we did have some people who wanted a paper-based something to look at. When you save it as a PDF, of course, you lose the interactivity in there, but you've got the content. So if somebody wants that kind of format, they can do that. It can also be saved in a format for a Kindle reader. You can use it on your iPhone. You can use it on a notebook. So that was another reason why we really liked it, the versatility that's behind the scenes there.
The web-based version from just visiting the URL also presents really nicely on the iPads that were distributed to students as part of the digital flagship. So that's an added bonus for those who are interested in the academic credit side. Certainly from the extension side, the fact that we can reach so many platforms with this tool will really help us get to different facets of our audience. We won't be selecting for those who have a specific set of tools at their disposal.
So again, one of the goals of this was just to provide some content for students, but also utilizing our extension resources. So when you go to the herbicide chapters, you'll see some reference back to the weed guide. And so one thought that we've had, and we've not had an opportunity to do this yet, is we're thinking about spinning off some of these for a continuing ed kind of audience. So there's a group called a Certified Crop Advisor national organization. And in order for a CCA, a Certified Crop Advisor, to maintain their status, they have to get so many continuing ed credits every 2 years. And so what we were going to do is spin off like 1 or 2 chapters for 1 or 2 CEU credits. And by doing it from the digital book, it makes it more of a learning kind of interactivity rather than just the reference guide that the weed guide has. So it's kind of taking that content and then repurposing it. And then also driving more traffic to the weed guide since our students or learners would then become more familiar with it. All right, questions. Are y'all able to get it to work okay for you? You can give me a thumbs up.
Oh, okay, Debbie. At first I saw the thumbs down. I was a little concerned. Flip that thumb around. We're good. Okay.
I'm going to start calling on you guys. Oh, there we are. Patricia, how about you? You finding everything okay? And feel free to use your microphones if you want to. Do they require logins? Great question. We do not because we set it up to where anybody who has the link can get in. Amy, do you want to talk about some of those settings you can do? Because like you can require a password if you want to.
Yes, you can. So there are different settings that are available within the Pressbook, which are really nice to, limit audiences when necessary. So to utilize the book in the format that we have without logins, we save the book as a public book where anyone with a URL can access the book. If you set the book to private, you have the option to show it to only those you invite, and they would then need to have their own Pressbook account. So you can restrict access that way. One thing to take comfort in is if your book is public, it does not automatically push it out to the Ohio State Pressbooks library for all to see just because it's out there on the bookshelf, the digital bookshelf. You have to request that your digital book be put out there in the catalog. So this particular book does not exist in the catalog, but our students can log in without a Pressbooks account. The Pressbooks content is housed on a Pressbooks server. This was all done through the security review process and everything else that Ohio State requires. Initially, we had an Ohio State house server, but the upkeep was just too much. So for the benefit of all the end users, we moved everything over to Pressbooks with ODE and the security team and everybody else's blessing. So, and I shouldn't say we, that's Mike Shiflett and the Affordable Accessibility team over in ODE. They did a really nice job of helping us transition over to the Pressbooks server. And so we get updates from Pressbooks and we get support, although we typically work through Mike Shiflett for things like getting an account and getting started. We haven't had a ton of troubleshooting issues. Dina, have you ever had to contact Pressbooks directly?
I have never had to. No.
Okay. And I saw the question about the link out to the weed guide, and it looks like Debbie found one in the references. Certainly, you can add URLs within the pages to different places. And with this particular digital book, I don't know if we quoted the material quite so much. There was, because of its referencey technical nature. The agronomy book that we did for another course, we worked to get permission from the agronomy guide authors, and we pulled in larger chunks of that content because it was more readable, more at the level that we were seeking for the content we were delivering.
Yeah. Yeah,
but
good.
certainly.
Yeah, thanks, Amy, for pointing that out. Right, as we were working on this introduction to agronomy, as we were looking at the agronomy guide, we're like, wait a minute, these content authors did a fantastic job describing content a little bit better. So that one, right, we did do more quotes and references. Now, I did put in there a link to a page because I was looking around to find a page where we actually did link out to the weed guide for this particular one. So I put a link there. On that page, we've got some links to some time-lapse videos that the HCS folks, the weed science guys, had done, so they can show the effects of the weeds kind of like starting to wilt and do other twisting and stuff. So that's one example there, besides just the references at the back.
And I see Yvette, are there costs involved with Pressbooks? As an Ohio State user, you have access to a free Pressbooks account. If you are outside of Ohio State, that would depend on your organization. And I don't think we don't individually pay costs for server upkeep and those types of things. I'm not sure if there are publishing costs if you actually go put it on the library, the digital bookshelf. I'm not sure. We've never done that step, but I can't imagine it would be very much because this tool is heavily pushed by the Affordable Learning Exchange group, and they typically focus on tools that are low cost. So
now Bruce Ackley, or actually in HCS, has used this tool for just kind of like a weed ID guide. And I think he's sold his at times, so I mean, there's a way to, make it to where if you want to do some revenue generation, you can.
Erin, if a book is set to private, users can create a free Pressbooks account. The only time you get charged for a Pressbooks account is if you're an author who wants to publish. We had encouraged our students actually at one time to make accounts to try a digital note-taking tool. It's an annotating tool. I forget what the platform name was. It was integrated with Pressbooks. We didn't have a lot of interest in that tool because the students didn't really want to make accounts, but the Pressbook accounts for a consumer are free.
Yeah, and you don't even have to have it to utilize the book. So just like
right,
you guys,
unless the book is private.
Oh, okay, gotcha. And what Amy means by the annotation, in case you're kind of new to that, with the annotation tool, if people logged in and created an account, what they could do is like keep notes, like kind of on the side. And we weren't sure if the students would actually use it, and they didn't. Maybe one or two of them did that. So, and they could like highlight text, you could circle it, you can put notes on the side. Other questions? I don't want to interrupt you guys as you click through there.
Is H5P a plugin type of application? Yes, so H5P is a plugin that is associated with Pressbooks. It is separate from, if you're familiar with h5p.org, that's sort of a separate staging area. The H5P content that you build in a Pressbook lives within that individual Pressbook. It can be exported and moved into a new Pressbook, but it isn't associated with an h5p.org account, which is something that ODE is pursuing licensing for. How that licensing will shake out for extension users, I'm not really sure. Sometimes we have to have discussions with ODE to make sure that we are permitted to use those tools outside of academic credit. But the H5P in Pressbooks stays there, and it comes built in with Pressbooks. You just have to enable a setting to use it.
I wonder if I see Heather's question. Amy, what if we go ahead and click over to the instructor side? It looks like we're
Sure.
getting a lot of questions now about the logistics. And while you do that, I'll answer Heather's question. So Heather, Pressbooks account is not the same as an OSU one. If you would like to be an author using the Ohio State license, we can get you in contact with Mike Shiflett. Actually, maybe we'll share his email here at the end. What you'll do is you'll contact him and then he'll set up an account for you. And so Amy is going to walk through how to log in. Okay, so.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I'm sorry if it was redundant, but I didn't catch it at the beginning.
No, that's great. Ask, no question is silly. So yeah, ask anything that's on your mind. That's a great question.
And actually that change is supposed to be coming down the line, but it might be a while. Since these tools are low cost and not exactly the revenue generating type, sometimes the updates take a little bit longer to get to. But eventually we're supposed to be able to access Pressbooks with our Ohio State login information. So this is the admin side of the Pressbook. If anybody's worked in WordPress, it'll probably look familiar. So in your catalog is where your books live, and you can create new books at will. It doesn't cost you anything. I've never reached the content storage limit, so I'm assuming there is one at some point with these accounts. But from all the images I put in a 20 chapter textbook and another textbook, I haven't maxed that out yet. So I would be curious what the actual limit might be. One of the things we talked about earlier for a use case is spinning off modules for CEUs or smaller chunks of content. There are ways to clone a book, so you can do editing for a different audience or utilize maybe some other county's extension, beautiful publication that they're willing to share, and you can change some of the verbiage in there to apply to your own county. So that's an option. To add and edit chapters, you would click on this organize part, and I do need to be careful with my word choice here because this is actually considered a part. The way that this works is what we would see as like a page in a traditional textbook is called a chapter, and each chapter is actually called a part by Pressbooks. So you can add parts and chapters to each part. One tip we found, since traditional page numbers don't really hold up well in Pressbooks, there aren't traditional page numbers in the digital format. There are page numbers in the PDF export. So we started this numbering system with 1.1, 1.2 to better help direct our audience if they're looking for content. And we'll just get into a page here. So you have your standard content editing tools, and this utilizes some of the preset text box options. So these all come with different color schemes, and I just I utilized those and I layered content on top of them to create a more polished look. And this is the interactive elements that you see from the student perspective. They're referenced in sort of a short code back here. So to build those, you actually have to use this tab on the side with H5P content where you can select the tool that you want, whether that's a drag and drop activity or a fill in the blank or multiple choice, true, false, those sorts of things. If you do elect to utilize H5P, we highly recommend that you go visit the H5P list of accessibility status on all of these item types. Not all of them are accessible. So you're going to want to do your very best to stick with the interactive elements that are accessible. Let's see. Dina, what else should I show? Does anybody have any other questions about how this works?
I don't know if maybe you want to go to the book, that's the template. I know you're in
Okay.
our live book, so you're not able to really click on
Yeah, I
things.
don't really want to edit the template either. So I can go to my template. So for anybody who's interested in getting started, I did kind of start building a template with sort of best practices outlined and some sample pages so you can sort of work with a framework and edit from there. My computer's having trouble keeping up. Okay, so here's an example of the template. This opening page from a chapter has an image, and all images need alt text and recommended sizes and all this. So for those that have approached me with interest, I clone the book and they get a copy, and then they can edit at will their copy of the template. Let's see. You can also edit themes and custom style options. I have chosen this Jacob style because it had what I thought appeared to be the most readable font, non-sans, it's a sans serif font, and the spacing and just the general design of the book seemed to be more readable in my opinion. I didn't run it through any specific accessibility checking, but since it's all, for the most part, black on white, I know we've got the contrast okay. You can export, this is where you would export a book to PDF for print or PDF for digital distribution, Apple Books, Kindle, that kind of thing. So you have a lot of choices when you want to export a book to a different format beyond the web.
Amy, along those lines, Annie has a question about if you can import content from other files.
You can import content from other files. I believe it's mostly from Word docs that you can import content from. We use the strategy of doing all the editing in a Word doc format, and then I would actually copy and paste that over to try to retain the structure of the document. I've never experimented with the importing very much, but I have heard that it is possible. We'll just click on the import button. So yeah, you can choose Microsoft Word, Open Office, Pressbooks web page, or Pressbooks webbook. So you can import content.
I'm going to paste a link in the chat box, you guys, while Amy was clicking through some things there. I Googled to get the link for the H5P accessibility list that she mentioned. So we've got that in the chat box for the recording as well. So you can go to that and it'll show you these different kind of interactive elements that you can put into your book, and they'll tell you which ones are accessible and which ones are not. Amy, maybe click on the H5P content a little bit and show people
Sure.
how that, because I know that's kind of confusing to understand.
Okay, so H5P content, you have to enable the H5P plugin in settings, and then this tab comes up on the left, and to add a new H5P piece, You just click Add New, and then you can select a content type. And it looks like I haven't been in here in a while. There's lots of updates available, but that's okay. I'll just use it as is. So this is multiple choice. That one's good and safe for accessibility. It is a little tedious to build these, but it's not that bad.
Yeah, you don't really need to know programming. You just, because they've got
No.
the forms there for you.
Yeah, and I do try to title my questions carefully because they kind of just end up in this massive list. So it's best to have something in the title, like where it belongs and what the question's about. So you kind of know where it goes. If you have lots of questions, I also recommend tagging it with what section of like a chapter or publication that it belongs to. So in a larger textbook, chapter 1 might have several questions. So, you know, I might do chapter 1, part 2 or something like that. You can kind of come up with your own system, whatever works for you. And then you just type in the answer choices, and there's some different settings you can mess with to enable the students to try again. Show solution can be turned off. You can set it to be a single choice or multiple choice or automatic. Most of the time the automatic works. I've had a couple of questions that must have been worded interestingly because it didn't quite know what to do. Randomized answers can be turned on or off, and depending on the nature of the question, you may want to turn that off. If you have an all of the above or something like that, you don't want those randomized. So you can change all those settings and save your question. So once you save a question, oh, sorry if I'm making anybody dizzy. Where's my save button? Oh, it may not let me save this because it's not updated, or the video pod is covering it. There it is. Create your question in the upper right corner. And this is kind of a preview of what the question will look like in the book. And you can also check it. So I forgot to change the correct answer. So I'll fix that. And so you can also embed these, but typically we use these short tags, and I'll show you how to add one in a page. So when you add an H5P element in a Pressbook page, it's pretty easy. You can click this Add H5P and then select the one you want from your list. If you know the number on it, you can also use this sort of short code system to put the ID number in there. And then I'm not a huge HTML whiz, so I just use the content editing tools to change the alignment of things. And so then you can view the chapter and see the change that I made. There's 2 questions in here. So H5P is a little tedious, but it's all built in and pretty simple, and you don't have to know how to code or anything like that.
And in some of our feedback from the students, they'd like those interactive elements there in there. So even though it's a little bit of tedious work, it seems to make a good impact. So again, if you're interested in using Pressbooks, and Ryan, this is true for you too, we can share this kind of template that Amy has built. We've shared it with Colorado State University when they were working with a USDA project, and it works pretty well. So that way you don't have to go recreate some of this outline and some of that formatting that Amy's got going. Questions you guys have? I can bore you with student data and feedback if you want, but let me stop here. Shout out other questions you guys have or thoughts.
This is Ryan. I'd be interested to see kind of what the back end looks like as far as student engagement or user engagement. If you like, what can you see? Can you tell what they've clicked on, what they've looked at? If we just get a look at that, that would be good.
Yeah, so this we do not write, Amy. This is what we have to ask Mike Shiflett for. Or do you?
So
And I'm thinking about it more from the aspect of like extension publications, so you can see how many hits they've
Yep.
had.
Yep.
So the data for the page hits and the bounce rate and that sort of thing is in Google Analytics, which I haven't pulled up right now because that is outside of the Pressbooks platform. So you have to have a Google account set up, and then the administrator would have to set you up. Ohio State is still brand new to collecting the Google Analytics data, so all the details of how you get access to that data haven't been totally worked out because we have a limited number of accounts that can utilize the data, but it is Google Analytics data that collects all those page hits. Down the line, I think we're supposed to be collecting H5P data because it does in Pressbooks record the responses. Well, not the individual responses, but the number of responses to the H5P elements. But I don't think that's been pursued yet either.
So Ryan, this is something that Wisconsin really had together, and it turned out that they were piloting. So for those of you who haven't heard of a consortium called Unison, I think there's 12 universities that are part of it. And Ryan, I can't remember if Purdue is part. I think they are. But regardless, anyway, Wisconsin was kind of taking the lead on how to really harness a lot of the data. And so at Ohio State, we don't have access to all that integration yet because it was being piloted, but we do have the Google Analytics stuff, right? And so I just put up here, this is, and our team is just now starting to dive into that. So we've offered these eBooks for 3 semesters now, and we've got our Qualtrics survey, we were asking student for feedback, but now we're also adding to that the Google Analytics to see, okay, did they really click on stuff and what did they click on, that kind of thing. So here you can see just a graph that another person on our team, Calvin, has put together. This is just brief draft, right? So this is nowhere close to being done, but it'll tell us how many page views we had, unique page views, number of times, minutes they were on each page. So the typical Google Analytics stuff. And then though, if they click on, okay, and this kind of gets to Debbie's question. So Amy, this is a question I have. If a student clicks on a video though, we're not collecting that data from Google Analytics. Instead, you'll have to go to the video hosting site to get that data.
Right, yeah,
Okay.
so once they bounce to a different URL, you're gonna have to be leaning on another set of analytics. So for our Vimeo videos, we can get different data, but Pressbooks itself doesn't tell us if they watched the video. And I see Debbie's question down here, and I just went and looked at the H5P data that's in Pressbooks right now, and it's just my results. My understanding was eventually we'll be able to get more results from the book, but I think it would require an account. So it may not end up being all that useful if you don't want to require your participants to have an account. The Google Analytics portion, I think, is where we're getting the most data from Pressbooks, especially at this point.
Debbie, that's a good question too. We'll ask Mike Shiflett and see, because maybe there's something we're not doing quite right to pull it for just people who come in and log in, or don't log in, but just access it online. Certainly Wisconsin was pulling all that kind of stuff, and I don't know how they were
It's
doing it.
there. I just don't know how we're supposed to get to it all because we're still working on building the foundation for that.
And part of what our hangup has been is, our data security kind of reviews. So I know some of the stuff I think Wisconsin was doing, they had it, had been looked at and it was okay, but we hadn't done it yet at Ohio State. So I think that was slowing up a few things. And then I assume with the Google Analytics, Ryan, it'll tell us where these hits are coming from. You know, certainly it tells us when, tells us, you know, that kind of thing. Other questions? So here's like another raw of the Google Analytics, just telling us exactly what chapter. By chapter, this would be our pages. So what pages they were looking at. What we're going to be doing with this credit side is comparing page views with quiz and exam scores to see if there's any kind of relationship there. You would think there is, you know, if they access it, they get better grades, but we'll see. To bore you guys with a little bit of data here. This is just a pilot that Amy put together for us. So we were comparing exam grades for certain question topics in 2017, which is before we had the ebook, and then 2018 is when we have the ebook. This is again just one semester. We've got more data now that we'll add to it. And so just kind of glancing through here, you can see sometimes the students did better with the video, recorded videos versus the ebook, and sometimes they did better with the ebook. Now, of course, as you think about that, they're not the exact same students, right? So we're also going to go back and look at what were the GPAs for the students for each semester, and just see, because sometimes sometimes you're not really measuring the tool, you're measuring the students instead. So we'll look at that and see if we can kind of parse that out. But overall, it looked like the grades were the same on those particular questions we were looking at. Certainly as an instructor and for maintenance, it's a lot easier to maintain this ebook because I can just go in and edit some text rather than having to redo an entire video. Or even if you got video clips, you know, with the 10 minutes or less, it's still far quicker for me to go in and just edit. So in fact, I did that this semester. I edited the book ahead of the instructor that's using it. So from a maintenance perspective, it's nice. All right. I'll go backwards here a little bit. So we were asking the students, this is their Qualtrics survey. So this is just where we're asking for their input and their feedback. And we did this about mid-semester, and this was just the first semester. So we don't have the other 2 semesters data in here yet. But it was, okay, so what happened was the ATI students were coming up to us after we did this ebook. The first couple weeks of class, they were telling us how much they liked it and they were excited about it. And they tended to be kind of grumpy students. So we felt really good that they were telling us that they really liked it. But we wanted to make sure it wasn't just a handful of students telling us that they like the tool. And so that's why we did a survey for all the students to respond. And I think we had like a 90 or higher percent completion rate of this. So we were really happy to see that overall the class really did like it. And that's what gave us then the confidence to go ahead and do this again for the second class that I taught. So this first question was just asking them how often they were accessing the book, and 1 to 2 times a week made sense because they had weekly assignments, right? So they were in there doing it for their assignment. This one we got into a little more detail to find out what tools they were using. So mostly, if we kind of look over here on the frequently or sometimes kind of summaries, they were using mostly the video, so the video clips. And then you'll see here that orangish bar, the darker colored one. That one is the review questions, so they were using that a lot. Sometimes not, I mean, it looks like there was only about 8 students or so that were using the annotation feature. So we kind of got away from that because it's still available if they want to, but most of them weren't doing that. And then about like 10 of them or so were using the links to other websites. So they weren't necessarily going out to look at some of the other content, which is okay, right? Because the book is there to kind of help them streamline their learning. Whoops, I had a delay here. So this one, we were asking for their overall kind of feeling towards the book. Okay, so the blue lines represent the interface was easy, so just the tool itself. And so that says here what, like 22 So over half of the group felt like it was easy. Another were neutral. None of them disagreed that it was easy to use. So everybody thought either, yeah, they were okay with it or they really liked it. The design is the orangish or reddish colored one. So here we had just a couple of students that didn't think it was very clean. But you don't know if those are the 2 students that didn't actually use it. So that kind of thing. And then overall, everybody was either agreeing it was a positive experience or they were okay either way. We only had 1 or 2 people that didn't like it. So we felt like it was a huge improvement over what we had with just their video clips from before. And then we were asking them as far as like the level, right? So is the wording we use too difficult for them? You know, is it a higher, because we have a lot of students that have learning disabilities as well. So we want to make sure we're hitting a good kind of level of reading. And then as well as the content, where we're going too deep or too easy. And in both of those cases, majority of the students felt like we were about right on. So we felt good about that. And then we asked them how useful they felt it was. So here you can see they all felt that the digital chapters were definitely, they got the highest level of being most used. And then we asked them about compared to PowerPoint slides, recorded lectures, and traditional textbooks. So definitely the ebook is right there or a little bit higher with this 1 semester of data. So again, we'll know more when we get the other 2 in there. But this kind of shows you a little bit of their feedback on it. And again, this is for credit students. So it'd be interesting to then, when we spin this out for non-credit audiences, what are we going to see there? Thoughts or questions, you guys? Something you want us to show you a little bit closer? Looks like we've got about 5 or 10 minutes left.
And I do need to acknowledge that the basis of that student perception survey was very much thanks in part to Mike Shiflett, and he's over in the Affordable Learning Exchange group in OD, and Steele Wagner over at Wisconsin. They shared their surveys with us so we could compile that survey quickly.
And I just typed in Mike's contact information here. So you've got his email and his phone number. So if this is a tool you'd like to use, feel free to contact him to get an account. But let Amy or I know as well, because we can get you a copy of that template book so that you can start there rather than having to start from scratch and building something. All right, anything else, you guys? I'll type in our email addresses too.
Will Eric Owens be looking at this type of content for accessibility for the college? So this is already a university approved tool. So it has been through 1 accessibility review. I don't know if Eric will be doing additional work with it as the new accessibility coordinator person. I know there's some more conversation coming down the line about the accessibility of various H5P content elements, because they're not all as accessible as listed on the H5P site, or there's some issues with some of them. But in terms of Pressbooks, I haven't heard anything else.
Yeah, our understanding is it's a fully accessible tool. We might be wrong with that. Some of the H5P elements, like you can have a picture, right? And the students have to click on, you know, the apple in the picture, that kind of thing. So things like that would not be accessible to someone who has low vision kind of capabilities. So, but the ones that Amy, again, the interactive elements that she put in that template are accessible. So if you stick with those, you'll be okay.
And then also some of the accessibility does require your input as an author. Every image must have alt text. You know, your best practice with URLs is to type some legible words that go with the URL so a user knows what they're clicking on. using your headings and all those sorts of things. There's another accessibility webinar coming down the line, so you can learn more about that when we get to that point in this webinar series.
Yeah, at the end of the semester. Yep. Other questions or thoughts, you guys? Cool. Thanks, Heather. Thanks a lot for all of your time. We appreciate it. We know you're all busy. Again, feel free to email Amy or I. We know a lot of things come to mind after you have some time to kind of digest it. Or maybe months from now, you'll be ready to maybe dive in more. I mean, especially with Amy's new role with Extension, feel free to reach out to us. We're here to help you out or help you test it. All right, Danae, I don't have our calendar handy. I don't know if you do. We could put a plug in for our next webinar that's coming up.
Let me find it.
Okay, sorry to put you on the spot. I just now thought of it. I think it's like in 2 or 3 weeks, and it seems like, is that our how to design a course?
I think that it's October 28th. That's the Engaging Online Audiences.
Okay, is that yours, Ryan?
Danae and I.
Awesome.
Yes, that sounds right. Sorry, it's in my email someplace, Barry.
Yeah, and watch, for those of you at Ohio State, watch the newsletter, the college newsletter every week, because it's in there too. Yep.
Yep, and I will be sending out dedicated registration links for each of the webinars as well. So stay tuned for those.
Fantastic. Thanks again, you guys. Have a good week. We'll go
Thanks,
ahead and
everyone.
sign up. I'll hang out here in case you've got questions here.